into that other side, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So when we talked the last time, we talked about a fair amount about your dad.
Yeah.
But we never really sort of covered your mom. Tell me a little bit about your mother.
Well, my mother was a wonderful woman. And she had 16 children. 8 boys and 8 girls. I think that's the way it went.
Right. What was her maiden name?
Arbuckle.
Arbuckle?
I think it was Arbuckle.
I think so too, because I think I remember you telling me it was Arbuckle.
Arbuckle.
Did she have any brothers or sisters?
She had a sister, Aunt Bertha, and Uncle Chester, a brother, but we very seldom ever saw them because we lived in the country.
Where did Aunt Bertha and Uncle Chester live?
They lived in New Glasgow, in the little town.
Oh, okay.
But to go to the little town, we had to take the train.
Right.
And or my father never drove a car, so we never had a car.
Did you have a horse and buggy?
No, we had a horse at one time, but it was kept in Grandpa's stables because he lived quite a distance from us, but really not too far. But he had cattle, like he had 7 cows.
Yeah, well, I remember you saying you used to go
with them.
But let's go back to your mom a bit. She
Yeah.
had Chester and Bertha as her brother and sister.
Yes.
And their last name was Arbuckle.
Arbuckle.
And did Chester and Bertha have many children that you recall?
We never saw them very much because they lived in town and we lived in the country.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I couldn't tell you honestly how many children
they had.
I don't know if Aunt Bertha had any.
Yeah. But what about Chester and Bertha, because they lived in the other town? What about your mom's parents? Like the Arbuckles?
The Arbuckles.
Did you see much of your grandparents on your mother's side?
Not really.
No, eh?
No. They lived quite a distance away from us.
Yeah.
And my father never drove a car.
Mm-hmm.
Never had a car.
Yep.
A car. And there was no way. There was no way that my mother could leave home and leave a whole pile of children at home to go to get on a train and go through to where her sister Aunt Bert lived.
Right.
And so we didn't see a lot of them. But every once in a while, Uncle Chester would pick up Aunt Bertha and bring them up to the house and to visit.
What was your mother's day like when she got from the day when she got up in the morning?
Oh my God. She got up with my father first, and he wanted a full breakfast. And she made breakfast, and she usually shook me a little bit and woke me up, and I got up and talked to him. But he was a wonderful man, but he was a man that if everything didn't go his way, or the way he thought it should go,
yeah.
It wasn't right. So when we would go and have to work with him, if we went to pick up something or do something with a piece of wood, he'd say, "Leave that alone. Don't touch that. I've got that at a certain angle and this, that, and all that nonsense." And now, what was the question?
We're talking about your mom, and I know we tend to lean over to your dad because he was the prominent one in the household.
Absolutely.
You know, he was the
boss.
master of the house, the boss.
He was the boss.
But your mom would get up in the morning, sometimes wake you up, you were saying.
Yes, wake me up.
And you'd start to make breakfast for your brothers and sisters and yourselves? Or?
Yes. Like after Daddy got off to work.
Right.
Like he left early because he had 2 miles to walk. He never drove a car, never had a car.
Yeah.
2 miles to walk to the railroad to get to work.
Right.
And then he took this...
But let's talk about your mom now.
Yeah.
Because we're going back to that. So
yeah.
he's gone to work.
He's gone to work.
He had a long way to go. What did your mom then do?
She woke us up.
Right.
We had to get up for school because we had 2 miles to walk to school, or
right.
a little over. And if there was any dishes, if the people in the night before and dishes weren't washed before we went to bed, like at 10 o'clock or something, those were all washed up before we left for school.
Yeah.
And then we had to find our clothes. Where's my shoes? And you must remember there was a whole house full of kids there.
Well, I don't remember. But
no, but you might have heard me talking about them. And we were just one right after the other.
Yeah.
And
did she like to cook? Did she?
She loved to cook, but she was what I remember most of my mother was she was always pregnant. She was always expecting a child.
Yeah.
So we tried to do, or I did anyway, what I could do to help her.
Yeah.
And we lived in the country, 2 miles to walk to school.
Yeah.
2 miles to walk to the store one way, 3 miles to another store the other way.
Yeah. Now, was she involved in crafts, or was she very handy at things like that?
Oh, she was handy at knitting, but for crafts, there was no time for crafts.
No, but she would, and maybe crafts is the wrong word, but would she, did she darn socks? Did she knit socks? Did she make clothes?
Yeah, she made clothes.
Yeah.
And she had one thing that my father wanted, a beautiful Singer sewing machine.
Okay.
And we all sewed on, but we were taught how. But my mother sewed. But it was one of these treadle ones that you had, it wasn't electric, you know,
no.
your feet. And once she got one of us, I was one of them, I was pretty good to sew. So she let me use the machine.
Right.
Put your feet on it and treadle it, you know. And what else was there?
Well, she would cook and she would sew.
She would cook.
And of course she looked after all the children.
Children, because she was pregnant nearly all the time.
Yeah.
Because and so many of us.
Yeah.
And Daddy.
But even when you moved out.
Yes.
And how old were you when you moved out? Do you remember? I think the other day you said 14 or 15.
14 or 15, around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she continued to have children after you moved out.
Yes.
Now, I remember when I was young, and your mother wasn't well. Do you remember what we did?
We went down there.
Yeah. How did we go?
By train?
By train, yeah. Do you remember the trip?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's far away. But I remember going, because that was the only way to go.
Yeah.
And then when we went to New Glasgow, the town, or Antigonish, we lived in between these two little cities.
Yeah.
And we always had to walk because my father never drove a car.
Yeah.
And he had a horse and wagon one time, but he gave that up because he thought he had to pay. It was too expensive to pay to have somebody bring oats and stuff for the animal to eat. And
well, you always had fresh vegetables out of the garden, didn't you?
Yes, he had a beautiful garden. The garden was as big as from here right away up to the corner there.
Yeah.
It's just,
I have to be saying it appears you were closer to your dad than you were to your mom.
We were closer to our dad. I was more afraid of my father, not scared. But when he said, they called me Khaki, of course.
Yeah.
Khaki, drop those poles or whatever over there for me, and be sure you put them straight and line them all up. Right. But this is what he used to upset me, and
that's what it was like back in the olden days, where he was the ruler of the house. He was
the ruler of the house. He was the boss. If he said put them, and if he said put them all in a row, and if you said to him, "Well, Daddy, what do you think?" He said, he'd look at you and say, "Put them all in a row."
Yeah.
Like, don't bother thinking something. But then afterwards, when the pile of wood got too big and it started to fall, then he realized what I was trying to say to him.
Right. Now, I remember you and I going down the train to see your mom.
Yeah.
And seeing her in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I remember her white hair and lying in the bed. Yeah. And I think she was in her 50s or something, wasn't she, when she passed away?
Yeah, she was died very young.
Yeah. Do you remember what she died from? Was it a heart attack? Maybe?
Heart attack.
Yeah.
Heart attack.
Yeah. Because she had a fairly hard life, I think.
Well, she did, because she had all those children, for God's sake.
Yeah.
She was every time she was seemed to be pregnant all the time.
Yeah.
And if she ever walked to the store, it was 2 miles there and 2 miles back, and you're expecting a child, and you're walking 2 miles there, and you're carrying. So we were always, and the country grocery store was right near the school. There was the church, and the school, and Dave McIver's store, and Ernie Mackenzie's store. Right in the bunch. So on the way to school or home, if she needed something from the store, we would pick it up on our way home and take it home with us.
Yeah.
Because she couldn't walk. She was pregnant, I would say, 90% of the time.
Yeah. Now, did you cook with her? Is that where you learned to cook?
That's where I learned to cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your favorite meal to cook back then?
I think my favorite meal to cook